So lung compliance, I say this is a very important concept because at the end of the day, you need oxygen to get into the lungs, and for the lungs to be able to accommodate that oxygen, they need to expand. So the extent of lung expansion per unit increase in transpulmonary pressure as oxygen is getting into the lungs is what is known as compliancy. So you can see this is very important. If the lungs are not compliant, that means oxygen won't get into the lungs. So this is a very important concept that you definitely need to understand. It explains a lot of diseases. It explains symptoms of a lot of diseases. So if you understand it very well, you won't have problems to be able to understand presentation of these different diseases and even treatment of some diseases. So lung compliance is inverse proportional to the elasticity. As I said, lung compliance has a lot to do with expanding the volume. Elasticity has a lot to do with collapse or going back to the original size. So obviously, lung compliance is inverse proportional to the elasticity. Go back and read and make sure you understand this concept. And this is a fact. Of course, there's a way you can derive this, but for now, just remember that the lung compliance is like 200 mils per centimeter of water. You should be able to revise and remember what is the relationship between centimeters of water, millimeters of mercury, and atmosphere, because we discussed a lot about the pressures within the lungs. Remember about the pleural cavity, remember about the negative pressure within the pleural, and the importance they play, or what they play when it comes to expansion of the lungs and the breathing mechanics. So I want to get deep into the compliance because I think it's very important and it's very much related to what we are going to discuss when we talk about the clinical concepts. So again, I said compliance is simply change in pressure that results in change in volume. So that means the lungs will expand because of change in pressure. So take a look at diagram A. You have change in pressure. That means oxygen is getting into the lungs from the atmosphere, and the lungs have to expand to accommodate that oxygen. So they have to move from the blue lines here to the red lines here. So this is expansion of the lung, and this is what is known as compliancy. But after this has happened, carbon dioxide has been produced from internal respiration. Carbon dioxide has to get out, and carbon dioxide to get out, the lungs need to squeeze. And this is a natural tendency, and this is what is known as elastic recoil. So they squeeze, they become small, the volume become less, and then carbon dioxide is expelled out. So if you look at these two concepts, compliance of the lungs, and then you have elasticity. As I said, elasticity has a lot to do with elastin and collagen. These are the proteins making up the tissue, so that it has this tendency to collapse, natural collapse. But of course, surface tension also plays a role or plays a part when it comes to elastic recoil of the lungs. Go back and read and make sure you understand, because this is very important when we will be discussing the clinical concepts related to the respiratory system. This is another important thing, the cells that make up the lung tissue, the pneumocytes. So the pneumocytes, there are two main groups of pneumocytes. One group is type 1 alveolar cells. These are squamous epithelia, as you can see. And if they're squamous epithelia, that means they are thin. And if they are thin, that means diffusion can take place quite rapidly. And these are for gaseous exchange. And this is the primary function of the lungs. So they constitute 95% of the population of cells. So they are for gaseous exchange. The other group of cells is what we call type 2 alveolar cells. As you can see, they are cuboidal, but they are granular. If the cells are granular, means they are secretory in nature. So what do these cells do? What they do, they secrete surfactant. Surfactant is very important. You need to connect. Surfactant has a lot to do with surface tension, so it reduces surface tension. Why is it a big deal to reduce surface tension? And this will tell you why the cells that only constitute 5% of the lungs are very important. So these are, my friends, type 2 alveolar cells, type 2 pneumocytes, cuboid in nature, as I said. As you can see, they are also they constitute 5% of the population of cells. Very little, but very important. They are granular pneumocytes because they are secretory in nature, and they do secrete alveolar fluid as well as surfactant. You need to make a difference. You need to know the difference between alveolar fluid and surfactant. They are two different things. But I can tell you the easy way. Alveolar fluid has to do with reducing friction. You know, the lungs are in constant movement. Expansion, relaxation, movement. So you have the pleural. So you need to have a fluid to lubricate the lungs so that you don't have friction when they are moving. So this is the function of alveolar fluid. Of course, it also has some other function, for example, creating the negative pressure within the pleural. All these things we discussed in the first semester. Please go and read so that you can understand when we start getting deep into the clinical concepts. Surfactant, very important. It reduces surface tension. And you know that surface tension assist or augment the elastic recoil. And if you have much of surface tension, the lungs can collapse because they have a natural tendency to collapse. So let's take a look at this diagram, which will make it easier to understand. If this is a cross section of a lung, you know, usually they have a natural tendency to collapse because of elasticity or elastic recoil. This is mainly due to the collagen and elastin fibers. As I said, if you take a rubber band and you stretch it, it has a tendency to go back. So this is what happened with the lung. But also you have the force of surface tension that can be explained by the fluids and the kind of fluid that is actually lining the lungs. We discussed about it, so you need to go back and read. So the force of surface tension and elastic recoil tend to make the lungs collapse, but surfactant reduces surface tension. So it reduces surface tension, and if it reduces surface tension, that means it increases compliance, because compliance move in the opposite direction. Compliance is about expanding, while elastic recoil is about collapsing. So surface tension is about collapsing. Surfactant is about reducing surface tension. So that means it increases compliance. By so doing, it prevents lung collapse. So these are some of the important basic concepts that you need to put together before we move into the clinical concepts. That's why I just introduced them for you to go back and revise. So I've given you points. Make sure that you understand these. These are what I call must understand, because usually I say you have three types. You have the points that you must understand. No way. So these are the ones. And you have the second group of points. These are the ones that are necessary to understand. And then you have the third group of points that are for students who want to get A's. These are they are good to understand. They are important. But you need to classify that. Make sure that you understand the things that are must to understand. These are the ones. And then you follow necessary and then important. Always do that. Don't get into the details when you don't even know the things that you must understand.